2 games in, what has stood out for the defending national champion UConn Huskies? Come find out. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, here's a quick update from us here at Locked On. October was incredible for Locked On UConn specifically, thanks to your support. Our community is growing incredibly fast, and we're thrilled to give back by donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send kids to UConn basketball, football games all this year. We also make a monthly donation to Bleeding Blue for Good and hope you'll consider supporting them as well. If you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to subscribe and follow wherever you listen. Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are now a top 100 sports basketball podcast. Right now, we're at 84 and rising. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right. As always, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we bring in my co-host, Dan Meehan of Exit 68. Let's get him in the program here and unmute his mic. Dan's been our kind of boots on the ground for stores and was at XL Center, soon to be known as the Hartford Civic Center again, which I found pretty interesting that in lieu of no sponsorship, that's what they're going to start calling it again. It's 2 games in. What's one thing you've noticed that you think probably you didn't expect at the start of the year?
I think coming in, we definitely expected Samson Johnson's fouling issue to continue until it didn't, and that's been a main theme in the first 2 games. One thing we didn't expect, I think, until we came into the second game against New Hampshire was Jaden Ross being a fixture on this team. He ain't going anywhere. He is going to be either in the starting lineup or playing premier minutes, I think, all season. After seeing what he brought to the court at the XL Center against New Hampshire, he was a total game changer. He is not going to be the same player he was as a freshman. He's going to be a fixture on this team. Liam is as advertised. He looks his offensive repertoire through 2 games. It is evident. I think he's the first freshman in UConn history to have a double-double in his first 2 games since Corny Thompson. So
since 1976.
For our UConn historians, that's significant. And the first person to have 2 double-doubles to start the season since Jeff Adrian. So he's as advertised. Caraban looks phenomenal, blocking a ton of shots. Solo ball, I think, is going to continue to be a spark plug for this team. His aggressiveness in the first 2 games was notable, both on TV when I rewatched the games, but in the stadium, it really seems like he has a good knack for when to kind of pick it up when the team might be sluggish, 3, 4, 5 possessions in a row, not maybe getting good shots. He knows when to kind of turn it on and pick those moments out. So, yeah, I mean, they're shooting 50% in both games. So shooting-wise, field goal percentage, they're still as efficient as they were last year. Free throw percentage is down a little bit, but that'll shake out. But, yeah, I think question marks on this team through the first 2 games, it's the fouling issues down low. It's trying to find a consistent presence, both offensively and defensively, where you can turn to and keep a guy on the floor for more than 5, 6, 7 minutes without having to sub out and go to a different type of lineup because you're forced into that situation because of fouling. So we'll see.
Yeah, I've thought through that. That's a great assessment. I've thought through the fouling issues and some of the chemistry that I've witnessed already with this team. And outside of the first half against New Hampshire, where it was a little choppy and they were kind of feeling each other out and they were getting a really bad whistle. And to Dan's point in his press conference, Samson's out there mauling guys when he really shouldn't be. I think you also were getting every team, no matter who it is, whether it's New Hampshire, Sacred Heart, Lemoyne, Texas, whoever. I don't know if they changed their name or, Commerce or whatever, who were playing after that. Like, these teams are all going to come out and try to beat the number one team in the country.
You're getting their best shot, no question.
Right. So you're never going to get a team, even though it's a bye game, even though these teams aren't as talented. You're never going to get a team that's just we're just gonna wing it against UConn. It's like the attention to detail is going to be there. They're gonna try to make every single shot. Not that they're not anyway, but it's just there's something different about going after a 2-time defending national champion, and it's Dan has talked about that. You're just it wasn't up to brand against New Hampshire, and but I think that's partly because this team's starting to realize that everyone's after their neck. Like really, like you can say it, but then you witness it and you feel it as a player. It's something's a little different, and that's only going to get enhanced when they start the better competition, like when they go to Maui or when they Gonzaga, who's now number 4 in the country in Madison Square Garden on the 14th, otherwise known as South. Baylor comes to town, just beat John Calipari's Arkansas team. Texas, who's probably a little less than what people thought, but these are still going to be big time opponents in that respect.
To your point there about being, facing just primetime competition, something you got to keep in mind as the season plays out, and I'll be interested to see how they kind of progress in certain spots, is for anyone that watched that CBS documentary about a week ago that they did, Dan talked about last season's team. The goal was to be as bulletproof as possible. Try to minimize any holes that you can. And last year's team was just stacked across the board. Even when they had to go to their 7th or 8th guy, those legs are fresh. And the second unit, as Rick Pitino famously said, 2 years ago, their second unit, there is no drop off. This season, they might have strong wings off the bench, but when you play some of these premier teams in the tournament, whether it's Gonzaga, the Michigan States of the world, you're talking about A+ scouting departments that are going to key in on your weaknesses. The Huskies need to figure out some of their woes and their holes now, so that when they get through the drubs of the back half of the Big East regular season, into the Big East tournament, and even in Maui, you want to figure out how these teams are going to key in on you, so you can use that to your advantage later on. When you get deep into a tournament, play 3, 4, 5 games, potentially get to a Final Four, you're talking about some of these teams that have the personnel on the other side that can exploit your weaknesses. Zach Edey last year, thankfully we had, Klingon. If we didn't have Donovan Klingon last year, that game looks totally different. Say that Samson Johnson going and Terrace Reed going up 1-on-1 against Zach Edey. He would have killed him. And Zach Edey almost had his way last year with a Donovan Klingon. He had 38 points in the game. So we have to figure, use these early games to kind of figure out our holes and try to plug them the best way we can.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think if you have a dominant big man like that, like to your point about Zach, I don't know if it would have looked much different, other than it would have been easier for Zach because I don't think they do. I honestly don't think they would have done anything different if Donovan was hurt or he wasn't available.
It can just break the game up a little bit and change what you planned on doing coming into the game and have to turn to other things. So it's not necessarily that.
And who knows with the following issues that they're having, if that continues, we're not going to be in the title game if our bigs are following constantly. Because as good as our wings are, as good as our guards can be, and I think are going to be better, Solo leading the charge there, unless that is evened out, unless it's partly bad whistle, partly discipline, partly just kind of being in the wrong pace at the wrong time, or, it almost looks like Samson is trying to make, show people how good he is and is like overcompensating a little bit. If he just relaxes and kind of just focuses on who he is as a player, he's going to give up some points. It's fine. Like he's not Donovan Klingon.
That's why you watch game film. They'll do it. They'll go back to the drawing board on campus.
That's the biggest thing for me is like, if this team takes a breather and realizes they're always going to get someone's best shot, but they just play free, they're going to be fine. When we return, we're going to talk about the Big East and some of Dan's comments in the postgame about scheduling smarter. I have some thoughts on that. I think you guys are going to like it. It'll crystallize and kind of almost interpret what he means by that. And we'll get into a look around college basketball at the end of the show. Coming up after this. What's up, UConn fans? Listen up. You need to download the Roy app. If you've heard of us talk about Roy all season, you know that they're revolutionizing the NIL industry. Roy lets you, the fan, have a direct say in who gets NIL support. And here's what I absolutely love about Roy. You get your money back if that player transfers or doesn't fulfill the content that they're supposed to give you. Roy is helping us keep our team intact, and that's great for the long term. Remember when Joey Fayano came off the bench to lead a thrilling comeback over South Florida? Or not South Florida, over UAB. Now you can show your appreciation directly. deposit a little love into Joey's account on Roy and help him make sure he stays with the Huskies. I'm going to throw $100 in just to kind of get him started. To get started, download the Roy app and visit joinroy.com. You can see the logo if you're watching it on YouTube. And now let's spotlight the Roy Player of the Week, Joey Fayano, after his clutch performance against UAB. We're throwing some support his way. Every contribution counts, $20, $5, it all adds up. Keep Joey here in the blue and white. So don't wait. Download the Roy app or head over to joinroy.com. Use the promo code Locked On. Every athlete for every team is there. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Visit joinroy.com for full terms. Support the players. Change the game. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. Something funny I just mentioned to Dan in the green room here is that Joey Fayano, as great as he played, and he's my Roy Player of the Week, he's graduating. So give him some money anyway, because he'll probably be appreciative. Hook him up. Definitely my Roy Player of the Week, and I was calling for him to come in last Saturday and take over for Nick Evers. But good win from the Huskies. We're going to talk more about that later in the week, previewing the Syracuse game. But now back to the men's basketball. Alex Karaban's leadership. Before we get into scheduling, because that's a big part of why people are going to get better seeds. If the Big East is going to get more than 3 bids this year is going to be really talked about here. But Alex Karaban was named preseason first-team All-American by the Sporting News. Him and Liam are now on the Wooden Watch list, right? I believe that happened.
Yep.
I think Alex has so far this year 18.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, and 5.5 blocks per game, shooting 64.7% from the field and 61.9% from three. That's a pretty good start.
Yeah, not bad. He ended up being the only 50, 40, 90 guy in all of college basketball last year. So he is picking up right where he left off, leading the charge. This team it's a younger roster, so they probably need a little bit more than last year where you had some veteran guys, a couple fifth-year seniors in the starting lineup. Alex is being turned to as the leader on this team. If you're gonna do special things, you're gonna need to get significant contributions from a freshman starter in Liam. And he looks directly to Caraban. They are very much in the same player. He calls himself the apprentice. So he learns a lot from Alex. They're going to continue to do that. He's going to have to lead the way, and he has absolutely done that so far through 2 games.
Yeah, no, and then to kind of wrap that aspect of it and get into this Big East aspect. Big East has now in the AP poll UConn State at 3. Creighton's at 14, Marquette's at 15, and St. John's entered the chat at 22. Here's a quote from Dan Hurley. We got to win the big non-conference games versus the other big leagues to get more bids. We also have to perform well in non-conference if we want more bids. And he said something that I thought was really important about scheduling smarter. And if people don't know this about me, before I did any of this UConn stuff, I was doing mid-major basketball, and scheduling for mid-majors and low majors is very difficult. So when they have a good team, like in a year where they have like a lot of seniors back, or they just bring back a lot of folks that are going to put a scare into people, those are the games that people are afraid to schedule them, because like Quinnipiac against St. John's, like that Quinnipiac team, if they make the tournament as like a 14 or 15 seed, has a good chance to be a 2 seed that's kind of just teetering on collapse.
Central Connecticut State University, for example, they've looked good through 2 games. They've almost knocked off a couple people.
Right. So, I mean, and I'm not saying that Fordham is, or Seton Hall is, made a mistake in scheduling Fordham, but you might want to start thinking about who you schedule as your bye game, because if you're not doing that work ahead of time to find out if this team is actually any good, then that's a problem for your team, because these beginning games, a lot of times you don't know what the hell you have. So but the other team does, because they have all probably juniors and seniors that haven't left, and that gives them a distinct advantage, even though they're on the road. So that's what Dan means by scheduling smarter, because look, the home team has a more than 75% chance of winning every single time, like no matter who's home. So if UConn went and played a mid-major on the road, that enhances the mid-major's ability to win just by being at home. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you're home, you need to understand that you're playing a team that you can beat like 9 times out of 10. It's going to take a miracle for them to beat you. A bye game should never feel like it's in question, especially for the Big East. You shouldn't have multiple in the first couple months. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how it works with the scheduling on how when in fact you schedule some of those games. Do you want to do it earlier so that you can get them on your schedule so that some of these teams don't get fill their schedule up so that you're not forced, backing into some of those situations where you're playing a team
Right.
that you might not want to face. So maybe get it out of the way earlier in the offseason. I don't know exactly how all of that works. UConn probably has maybe deeper pockets to pay for some of these games and
Mhm.
than some of the other teams in the Big East. I don't know, but yeah, you got to schedule smarter. Take it from the UConn football team this year. They needed to rebound and show people that they were still a premier, football program. They're not where they're going to be yet, but Jim Moore done an incredible job. I'm not going to call what they scheduled this year a cupcake schedule, but they were smart in scheduling games where they could get a little confidence brewing and reel off a couple wins in a row, and they've done that, and they're going to get a bowl game. So it worked. Schedule
For
smarter,
sure.
but
And
you also got to, yeah, go ahead.
no, it's a great point. I think depending on the profile of the team, buy games cost anywhere between like $100,000 to $200,000. So that goes directly to that team's athletic department. You're
And I
paying
think
them to
UConn
come,
has the most expensive buy schedule in all of college basketball this year.
and that's fine because they've earned it. And I think you could say the same thing about Duke, and you could say the same thing about Kansas. You're never going to see. I just don't think you're ever going to see a buy game loss from Kansas because they're too smart to kind of to schedule a, like, even the team that I covered down here in Greensboro had some really good players. Like had a player that's playing in Spain right now, one of the best shooters I've ever seen in Francis Alonso, and one of the best athletes I've ever seen. If he went to UConn, he'd be a star. In Isaiah Miller, he plays with Cam Spencer on that G League team in Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
So like they had two pros on that UNCG team and played at Kansas, only lost by like 12. But Kansas was the number one team in the country and knew that they were going to beat them anyway. Like that's the whole point. Is like if you're not at that level, you're not going to schedule a really good mid-major like Greensboro or Wofford or Belmont, who you see or before Butler became the Big East, like they were a mid-major. You just wouldn't see them play like a big-time program because they didn't want to lose. So like that's the thing that people have to understand. Like Seton Hall cannot schedule a Fordham. I don't care about the relationship. Like for example, most buy games are relationship based. Like I know you, Dan. Maybe you were on my staff and now you're at Quinnipiac, so I'm going to give you a shot against St. John's. Okay, we get that, but outside of that, you guys really need to figure it out. So the rest of the league doesn't
here's something
suffer.
Here's another thing you have to consider later in the year. It's just whether or not you think the committee is using Ken Palm and these other rating systems. They can tell you that they're not using these rating systems, and when they pick bids for on Selection Sunday, they are absolutely looking at them. They think the same way that you and I do. They have the same information. Blowouts matter. There's nothing wrong with blowing out a crappy team.
Nope.
There's something very wrong with losing to one of those teams.
Yes.
So yeah, take it for what you want, but you got to schedule smarter. And for a team like the conference like the Big East that is trying to rebound off of a down year with only 3 bids, whether or not they got screwed off of Providence or Seton Hall or St. John's making the tournament last year, they're looking to rebound. And this is one of those years similar to UConn football where you just schedule a couple cupcake games, try to get back, on people's good graces and get a 4, 5, 6 bid conference in 2024, 25. So we'll see.
Absolutely. And the big elephant in the room before we get to the next segment, or just like looking around college basketball, is the net ranking still matters, guys. As wonky as that thing is, where before the tournament started, Houston was ahead of UConn in the net rankings and all that stuff. It's like, it's silly. We get it. But this is the tools that they're going to use. They can use the net and use Ken Palm. They probably will use Evan Maikawa. They'll use
there's 365 teams in Division I basketball. We cannot watch all of these basketball games. They turn to these rating systems to catch themselves up on the information the same way you and I do. These
absolutely.
Are busy people.
And you can't lose quad 4 games, and you can't lose quad 1 games at home against tough competition if you want to be considered for the NCAA tournament. You have to have a good compilation of everything. So can't lose bad games. A quad 4 game is a bad game. So that and Seton Hall just took one. Who else lost? Was it Xavier, I believe, or Butler?
Butler lost.
Yep. So guys, we got to get rid of that. And then people wonder why I've been talking about the Big 12 and moving there, because Not going to get a lot of that in the Big 12, just to be fair. All right, we're going to move on. Let's look around college basketball. The Big East, Ryan Kalkbrenner is having a monster year so far, as well as others around the Big East landscape, and more after this. What's up, everybody? Let's get ready to tackle the NFL action with the FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $500, $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sports app gives you everything you need to place the live bets in the NFL all at once. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn with host Mark Zanetto and my partner in crime on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Dan Meehan of Exit 68. Dan, what have you seen so far from college basketball? For me, the teams that stand out are Houston, but they got beat by Auburn. And that fight on the plane didn't affect them at all. What does that tell us about Auburn and their capabilities?
I don't know. Resilient squad. Maybe Bruce Pearl brought the hammer down when they landed. I don't know, but those are some funny tweets flying around. The black box recording of the pilots.
Oh my God. People deleted that. I saw people made people delete that because you can't find it anywhere right now.
That was funny. There were basketball players fighting in the cabin. An emergency landing is insane. It's one thing to have a scrap on the plane, but to actually have to decide to do an emergency landing elsewhere where you weren't planning to that's bad. But around the landscape, what I've seen, I thought Arizona has looked really good. Auburn looked really good. There, like I said it last week, I think that the teams that are going to do damage in today's day and age are the ones that have been around with premier coaches that know the landscape, know how to navigate a tournament. So Bruce Pearl is absolutely one of those guys that I expect to be there in the end this year. They were awesome last year, early exit, but I think this team, Johnny Broome, fifth-year senior, that team's going to be there in the end. So they've looked, to no surprise, really well. I love Evan, our good friend on the program, Evan Miyakawa's team rankings. He has a little emoji next to the teams that are kind of doing well, that are on fire or trending in the wrong direction. So on his side, Arizona looks good. Auburn looks good. Kentucky, I think, looked fantastic in their first couple games.
Good ball movement.
I think Mark Pope is going to be a really good hire for that team. Arkansas, they look like they might be just running the same thing that Calipari was running at Kentucky the last decade. We'll see how that shakes out. Illinois looked good. St. John's, welcome back to the Big East, Rick Pitino. That's a team I thought that brought in some really good transfer portal additions. I picked them to finish top 3 in the conference. And this is, I think, the first top 25 ranking they've had in years. So congrats to the Johnnies. Shout out to my 2 cousins, Michael and Emily Quinn, who are the biggest 2 St. John's fans I know, have lived in Queens, New York for over 25 years, big supporters of the program. So, glad to see them kind of making some headway. What do you think?
Yeah, for me, I love I honestly, Kansas and North Carolina was the best game over the weekend. I watched that game, and I thought Kansas was going to overwhelm North Carolina, and North Carolina really surprised me with their ability to come back. And I have to give a shout out to our boy Little Red, who was tweeting that game was similar to the UConn game. And I kind of dismissed it. And then I messaged him back and I said, you were 1,000% right, because it really was. I mean, they had a shot to tie it. Coming back,
the comeback was similar. I think this game was a little bit more higher scoring than ours was. We couldn't get much going early on in that game, but the way it kind of played out with
the tenor of it, the cadence of the game was very similar. And I didn't notice it until he said that. And then as North Carolina was starting to make that comeback, I was like, okay, now I understand what he means, because Kansas, but the only difference I would say about this year's Kansas team to last year's is Kansas last year didn't have the shooting capability that they have this year. This year they have guys who can really stroke it. And
they ran out of guys last year at the end of the season. Yeah. They were just hurt. They had, the Nick Timberlake was playing late in the season, and he just prove that he did not belong on playing at a high level basketball like that. But they're loaded, man. They're athletic as heck. They can shoot now. Zeke Mayo, the great transfer shooter. They're KJ Adams. They're loaded. They're going to be there in the end. Whether it's, I think just off roster alone, they're going to do some damage. Win a couple games in the national tournament. We'll see if they get to a Final Four. But that's one of the rosters with a premier coach that can do some damage and go late into a tournament.
Yeah, I think they're an interesting one. Kansas and I think North Carolina is going to be good this year. I think obviously they lost in a losing effort. They showed some really good resolve and toughness playing in Fog Allen and not just folding, because that could have been the easiest thing for them to do, which is just be like, hey man, we just don't have it today.
Tough place to play too.
Really tough place to play.
It was awesome.
Yeah, I think I don't know why. I think they dropped like in the polls to like. Let me look at that really quick because I feel like they dropped.
They're between 10 and 20. AP rankings. North Carolina's they're at 10. 1-1.
Okay.
They're at 10.
They only dropped one. I thought I saw 14, but maybe I was looking at the women because that's who the UConn women played this Friday. So that's what happens when you do double shows. You get those confused. It's okay. Gonzaga's looked really good, and that's we've touched on this in the past. Like, is this a Gonzaga Mark Few just absolutely doing what Gonzaga does in the regular season? I think that remains to be seen. I think they're going to be a tough out. I think that's going to be a dynamite game in Madison Square Garden, Store South. But I think honestly, the team that bounced back the most is, even though it wasn't that impressive of a win, I think Baylor, man, like they got absolutely destroyed by Gonzaga, and then they came back and beat an Arizona State
Their
team.
offense to me looks a little stagnant. There's not a ton of ball movement, so I wonder how that progresses throughout the season and how that will look on the national stage. But again, they'll have an awesome Big 12 slate, conference regular season slate to kind of work through some of that stuff, and they've got a great coach to navigate them through it. But yeah, I'm just going to take you through the top 10 here. And
please,
we have an awesome basketball season coming in college. Kansas with Bill Self, loaded lineup. Alabama, Nate Oates, incredible offense. UConn 3, they're going to do what they do. Gonzaga, Mark Few, loaded. Auburn, Johnny Broome and Bruce Pearl, loaded. Duke, freshman of the year candidate in Cooper Flagg, John Shire. We'll see how that team progresses. Iowa State, loaded. Houston, Kelvin Sampson, back again. Arizona, Caleb Love, and North Carolina, Tennessee, Baylor, Purdue, Creighton, Marquette. Like that's a top 10, top 15 AP rankings poll with just loaded rosters and great headline coaches. So I just think we're set up to have a really fun college basketball season.
For sure. And then, what's so interesting too is because obviously we've been linked with Indiana because of the Braylon Mullins thing. I watched the first half of that Eastern Illinois and Indiana game, and then I turned it off. And then, of course, you look back and Indiana outscored Eastern Illinois 54-18 in the second half to really kind of make up for such a lackluster performance where you're down by one at home to a low major. Like that's not like we were talking about. That's not like Quinnipiac, who's probably going to be in the 120s or 130s in the net. That's someone that's probably in the 300s. And if I'm wrong on that, then people can find out and get at me about it. But it felt like same old Indiana, but they righted the ship. I think that's going to be a tough place for Mike Woodson to continue to win there, even though they're talented. They have some good players on that team. The other side of this, I would say, is from more close to home. Dude, what's going on in Providence? Like, are they like? I know people think it's just because it's rivalry, but I want Providence to be good. I want Providence to be good because Agreed. It helps the Big East, and it also helps with another rivalry game. Like if I do make it up to a game this year, I would love to come to the Providence one because I think the atmosphere is unmatched. But I also wanted to feel like the St. John's game last year at Gamble, which was without Donovan, we won that game, but it seemed like crazy, right? I want that atmosphere when I go. Like, I don't want it to be, it's great to beat someone by 40, but I mean, what the hell's going on in that program?
I have 3 games circled on my schedule as the ones that I'm most excited for on UConn's schedule this season. 2 of them are against Providence. It's in Providence at Gamble, and then St. John's at Gamble. I just think those are going to be incredible atmospheres. I think Kim English is one of the best coaches in the country. I don't know how long he's going to be at Providence. I think he's a total leading man. Looks the part, acts the part. Brought in a couple transfer portal guys to kind of beef up the center of that team, 7-footers. Yeah, but I think something to keep in mind is in this transfer portal age, we talk about scheduling smarter. Everyone in the country is dealing with this same thing. Everyone's got new additions that they need to figure out, rotations and rosters and meld with. There's going to be some ugly games early in the season. This is why you schedule cupcake games, so that even if you have some of those growing pains to work through, you don't slip up and catch a loss to a mid-major. But I think everyone's dealing with this. It's going to be a theme going forward as long as the transfer portal exists. You just have to hope that you have an existing roster that when you do bring in some of those guys and make additions and have to fold those guys into your existing roster, that you can do it kind of on the fly and not slip up. So Providence, I think, will get there. I have them finishing in the top 5 in the conference. Take that for what it is, but we'll see.
I think I have a much simplistic answer as to what's wrong with this administration is. Did they ban the duck?
The duck.
That
they banned the duck
about? Like,
they kicked him out.
Why would they do that? Like, what? I mean,
first of all,
all the help they're going to get.
Incredible story early in the college basketball season. This is why we love college basketball. I don't know who snuck them in, but they posed it as a rescue animal.
Yep.
And yeah, I think they banned him from the arena. So I don't know. Maybe someone will try to sneak him in.
Says it's as a service animal. Yep.
Service animal.
Brought to the basketball game. Our good friend of the program, who's a notorious Providence troll, who is Matthew Leb, who he interviewed the guy that had the duck. I don't understand why, if you're a program, like we've talked about this with UConn, right? And how they brand themselves and how they kind of love the, adulation and really kind of, Dan's on Good Morning America, doing all this other stuff. Like, if you're Providence and you're essentially punching up, you're not punching down right now.
Yeah. Got to make a name for yourself.
As much juju and kind of like goodwill as possible, and like have this lucky duck, like be a part of the fan base. Hell, make it a night. Give out, stuffed ducks, like animals that people will like.
It'll make for some good signs in the crowd. That's for sure. If Providence, I don't know if Providence is playing in any of the ESPN game day games this year, but it'll make some fun signs in the crowd.
Well, listen, that's the episode. I had to bring that up because I thought that was hysterical. Like, like if you're trying to do something with your program, like I know they want to be built on substance, but sometimes you just have to roll with some stuff. And
for sure,
and that duck would have given them enough publicity to last for at least another month. But hey, what do I know, right? We're just running a podcast. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. Dan, really appreciate you. Look forward to Thursday when we get together again. Check us out tomorrow, where we're going to talk through Lemoyne and the preview of that game. I don't think UConn has much to worry about, so we didn't really focus on that on today's show. But that's it. Stay locked on, stay connected. Make sure those toughness meters are always rising. And as always, go Huskies.